In the depths of a Russian monastery, three brothers gather around their dying father's deathbed, each carrying the weight of humanity's greatest questions. Can an honest man, a believer, love his neighbour? It's the chief question of the age. These words, spoken by Fyodor Dostoevsky through the trembling lips of his characters, pierce through time like a blade through silk. They cut to the very marrow of what it means to be human in a universe that seems indifferent to our suffering. The year is 1879. Gas lamps flicker in the windows of St. Petersburg as Dostoevsky, his epileptic body ravaged by seizures and his soul scarred by 4 years in a Siberian prison camp, hunches over his desk. His pen moves across paper like a surgeon's scalpel, dissecting the human condition with surgical precision. Each word bleeds with the intensity of a man who has stared into the abyss and found it staring back. Fyodor Pavlovich Karamazov emerges from the page like a grotesque carnival mask come to life. His laughter echoes through the halls of his estate, a sound that carries the bitter tang of corruption and the sweet poison of self-destruction. He is not merely a character, but a mirror reflecting humanity's capacity for degradation. In his bloated face, we see our own potential for moral bankruptcy, our own willingness to trade dignity for momentary pleasure. The eldest son, Dmitri, burns with the fire of uncontrolled passion. His hands shake, not from fear, but from the trembling energy that courses through his veins like liquid lightning. In gambling halls and taverns, he throws money into the air like confetti, watching it fall like autumn leaves. His love is violent, his hatred pure, his very existence a testament to the dangerous beauty of living without restraint. Ivan Karamazov sits in the corner of smoky cafes, his intellectual brilliance casting shadows that dance across his pale features. His mind is a cathedral of logic, each thought a precisely placed stone in an architecture of doubt. He speaks of God with the fervour of a believer and the precision of an atheist. His famous declaration that if God doesn't exist, everything is permitted, becomes a philosophical earthquake that still shakes the foundations of moral thought today. Alyosha moves through the world like a gentle ghost, his presence both ethereal and profoundly grounding. In his eyes burns the quiet flame of faith, not the blazing torch of fanaticism, but the steady candle that illuminates dark corners without blinding. He listens to confessions that would break lesser souls, absorbing the pain of others like a sponge soaks up water. His very existence poses the question, can goodness survive in a corrupt world? The illegitimate son, Smerdyakov, lurks in the shadows like a question mark made flesh. His epileptic seizures mirror those of his creator, each convulsion a physical manifestation of the spiritual convulsions that rack the human soul. In his servants' quarters, he philosophizes with the cold logic of a chess master, moving human lives like pieces on a board. He is the dark sun, the shadow self, the embodiment of ideas without the burden of conscience. Father Zosima lies on his deathbed, his weathered hands folded like autumn leaves. His death becomes a meditation on mortality, his decomposing body a reminder that even saints must surrender to the democracy of decay. Yet from his dying lips flow words that carry the weight of accumulated wisdom. He speaks of universal responsibility, of the interconnectedness of all souls, of love as the only antidote to the poison of existence. The Russian Orthodox Church looms over the narrative like a great stone cathedral, its golden domes catching the light of both sun and candle flame. Within its walls, faith wrestles with doubt in a cosmic boxing match that has no referee. Dostoevsky himself had experienced this struggle, his own faith forged in the fires of suffering. The Church becomes not merely a setting, but a character, breathing with the collective sighs of centuries of believers and doubters. Grushenka appears like a vision from a fever dream, her beauty both salvation and damnation wrapped in silk and perfume. She moves through the story like a force of nature, her very presence altering the gravitational pull of every scene she enters. In her eyes, men see reflections of their own desires and fears. She is Eve and Mary Magdalene, temptress and redeemer, the eternal feminine that drives men to both creation and destruction. The courtroom becomes a theatre where justice performs its ancient dance with prejudice and passion. Lawyers pace like caged animals, their arguments echoing off stone walls that have witnessed countless human dramas. The trial is not merely about guilt or innocence, but about the very nature of truth itself. Can 12 ordinary men divine the mysteries of the human heart? Can justice ever be more than educated guesswork dressed in legal robes? Dostoevsky's own trial for revolutionary activities haunts these pages like a ghost made of memory and ink. Standing before his executioners, blindfolded and ready to die, he had felt the cold breath of eternity on his neck. The reprieve that came at the last moment transformed him from a young radical into a mature philosopher of suffering. This brush with death colours every page of his masterwork with the urgency of borrowed time. The Grand Inquisitor emerges from Ivan's tortured imagination like a figure from a medieval painting, his face carved from shadow and authority. He speaks with the voice of institutional power, explaining why humanity cannot bear the terrible burden of free will. His words carry the weight of centuries of religious and political oppression. In his argument, we hear the echo of every dictator who has ever claimed to act for the greater good, every authority that has traded freedom for security. Christ appears in this parable as a silent figure, his presence more powerful than any words. He does not argue with the Inquisitor, but simply kisses him, a gesture that contains more theology than libraries of doctrine. This kiss becomes one of literature's most profound moments, a collision between divine love and human fear that reverberates through the centuries. It asks us whether we would recognize truth if it stood before us in humble flesh. The children's subplot weaves through the narrative like a golden thread, their innocent cruelty and capacity for redemption reflecting the adult world in miniature. Young Kolya struts with the pride of a peacock, his intelligence both gift and curse. In their games and quarrels, we see the seeds of adult conflicts. Their capacity for both kindness and cruelty reminds us that moral choice begins in the playground and continues until the grave. The murdered father's body lies cold in the study, his death becoming a dark sacrament that transforms everyone who encounters it. Blood pools on Persian carpets, each drop a scarlet question mark demanding answers. The murder itself is less important than what it reveals about each character's capacity for violence, guilt, and responsibility. Every brother becomes both potential murderer and victim, every motive a window into the human capacity for darkness. Dostoevsky's gambling addiction pulsed through his life like a second heartbeat, driving him to pawn his possessions and flee creditors across Europe. This compulsion finds its way into Dmitri's character, the fever of the roulette wheel spinning in his blood. The addiction becomes a metaphor for all human compulsions, the ways we surrender our freedom to forces we barely understand. Every bet placed is a prayer to a god who speaks only in the language of chance. The Russian winter seeps into every page, its cold fingers reaching through windows and under doors. Snow falls like ash from a burned offering, covering the landscape in a blanket of white that suggests both purity and death. This climate becomes a character itself, its harsh beauty reflecting the harsh beauty of the human condition. In the endless white expanse, characters confront their own mortality and the cold indifference of nature. The tavern serves as a confessional booth where vodka replaces holy water, and drunken revelry becomes a form of primitive communion. Here, men spill their secrets like wine, their inhibitions dissolving in alcohol's bitter embrace. These scenes capture something essentially Russian about the relationship between suffering and celebration, the way joy and sorrow intertwine like lovers in a dance that has no ending. Dostoevsky's wife Anna appears in the dedication, her love a beacon that guided him through the storms of creation. She typed his manuscripts, managed his finances, and endured his seizures with the patience of a saint. Without her steady presence, this masterpiece might have remained forever trapped in the author's tormented mind. She becomes the hidden hero of Russian literature, the woman who made possible the preservation of genius. The monastery bells ring across the Russian countryside, their bronze voices carrying prayers and lamentations on wings of sound. Each toll marks not just the passage of time, but the heartbeat of a civilization grappling with its own soul. In these bells, we hear the voice of old Russia, the world of faith and tradition that was already beginning to crack under the pressure of modernity. Their sound becomes a lament for innocence lost. The intellectual salons of St. Petersburg buzz with dangerous ideas imported from Western Europe. Nihilism spreads like a virus through the minds of young Russians, their faith in God and Tsar crumbling like ancient parchment. Dostoevsky himself had been infected by these ideas in his youth, and his novel becomes an antidote to the poison of despair. Through his characters, he explores both the appeal and the danger of philosophical rebellion. The epileptic seizures that plague both author and character become windows into the divine, moments when the veil between worlds grows thin. In these convulsions, consciousness expands beyond the boundaries of ordinary experience. The falling sickness becomes a metaphor for prophecy, for the way truth sometimes arrives not through reason, but through the violent disruption of normal awareness. Each seizure is a small death and resurrection. The funeral procession winds through muddy streets, the deceased's body bouncing in a wooden cart like a sack of grain. Death here is not dignified, but common, as ordinary as bread and as inevitable as winter. This democratic vision of mortality strips away the pretensions of class and wealth. In death, the peasant and the prince share the same wooden box, the same handful of dirt thrown on the same dark silence. The icon of the Virgin Mary hangs in the corner of every room, her painted eyes witnessing every human folly and triumph. These images become silent judges, their presence a reminder that even our most private moments occur under the gaze of eternity. The icons transform domestic spaces into churches, every room a sanctuary where the sacred and profane meet in the daily drama of existence. They watch over sinners and saints with the same compassionate gaze. The letter arrives like a messenger from hell, its words carrying the power to destroy lives and relationships. Paper becomes dangerous, ink transforms into poison, and the simple act of reading becomes a form of violence. These documents reveal the power of written words to alter reality, to create guilt where none existed, to transform love into hatred with the stroke of a pen. They remind us that literature itself is a form of moral responsibility. The peasant woman kneels in the dirt, her tears mixing with the earth as she pleads for her lost child. Her grief is so pure, so complete, that it becomes a form of prayer more powerful than any ritual. In her suffering, we see the universal human condition stripped of all pretense. Her tears water the ground like rain, and from this moisture, compassion grows like flowers in a cemetery. The philosophical debates that rage through the novel's pages echo the intellectual ferment of 19th century Russia. Ideas clash like swords, each argument a battle for the soul of a nation caught between East and West. These conversations occur in drawing rooms and streets, in churches and taverns, everywhere that human minds gather to wrestle with the great questions. The novel becomes a parliament of ideas, democracy conducted through dialogue. The smell of incense mingles with the stench of poverty, creating an olfactory symphony that captures the complexity of Russian life. Sacred and profane intermingle like smoke and air, inseparable and essential. This sensory detail grounds the novel's philosophical flights in physical reality. The body's responses to beauty and ugliness become a form of wisdom that transcends intellectual understanding. The railway that cuts across the Russian landscape becomes a symbol of progress and dislocation, its iron rails carrying both hope and fear into the future. The train's whistle echoes across fields like a cry from tomorrow. This technology transforms not just transportation, but consciousness itself, shrinking distances and expanding possibilities. It represents the modern world that is arriving, whether humanity is ready or not. The merchants count their coins while the poor count their sorrows, creating a mathematical equation of suffering that no amount of wealth can solve. Money becomes both salvation and damnation, its power absolute and utterly meaningless. These economic realities reflect the social upheavals of Dostoevsky's time, when old certainties were crumbling under the pressure of industrial change. The novel becomes a prophet of revolution, predicting the storms to come. The dreams that torment the characters become landscapes of the soul, territories where guilt and hope battle for supremacy. In sleep, the unconscious mind reveals truths that waking consciousness cannot bear. These nocturnal visions transform the novel into a psychological journey, an exploration of the hidden chambers of the human heart. Dreams become more real than reality, revealing the true nature of character. The food on the table tells stories of class and culture, each meal a meditation on appetite and satisfaction. Bread becomes sacrament, soup transforms into communion, and hunger reveals itself as both physical and spiritual need. These domestic details ground the novel's cosmic themes in daily reality. The act of eating becomes a form of prayer, a recognition of humanity's dependence on grace and the generosity of the earth. The love letters burn like small suns, their passion threatening to consume everything in their path. Words become fire, desire transforms into destruction, and the human heart reveals its capacity for both creation and devastation. These documents of devotion demonstrate love's power to transcend rational boundaries, to transform ordinary people into poets and fools. They prove that the greatest literature often emerges from the deepest feeling. The judicial system becomes a theatre of human folly, where truth performs its ancient dance with prejudice and procedure. Justice wears a blindfold not to ensure fairness, but to avoid seeing the complexity of human motivation. This courtroom drama reflects Dostoevsky's own experiences with Russian law, his understanding of how institutions can both protect and destroy the individuals they claim to serve. The trial becomes a trial of society itself. The cemetery stretches into the distance like a city of the dead, its headstones marking the places where stories have ended. Here, the democracy of death reveals itself, erasing the distinctions that seemed so important in life. These graves become classrooms where the living learn about mortality, about the temporary nature of all human achievements. The cemetery teaches the hardest lesson, that love is the only thing that survives our dying. The influence of European literature flows through these pages like a river carrying ideas across borders. Dostoevsky engages with the works of Dickens, Hugo, and Balzac, transforming their insights into something uniquely Russian. This literary conversation demonstrates how great art transcends national boundaries, how the human condition speaks a universal language that every culture can understand and translate into its own idiom. The novel's publication in monthly installments created a sense of anticipation that gripped Russian society like a fever. Readers gathered in cafes and salons to debate each chapter, the fictional characters becoming as real as their neighbours. This serialization process transformed reading into a communal experience, literature into a form of social communion. The novel became a shared dream, a collective journey into the depths of human nature. The shadows that fall across the pages grow longer with each passing chapter, darkness threatening to engulf the small flames of hope that flicker in human hearts. Yet even in the deepest night, stars continue to shine. These shadows represent not just the darkness of human nature, but the mystery that surrounds all existence. They remind us that understanding has limits, that some truths can only be approached through faith and love. Today, more than a century after its completion, the Brothers Karamazov continues to speak to readers with the urgency of a message delivered by the last living witness to some cosmic catastrophe. Its questions remain our questions, its characters our mirrors, its moral complexity our inheritance. In a world that seems increasingly fractured by ideology and hatred, Dostoevsky's vision of universal responsibility and redemptive love offers not easy answers but necessary struggles. The novel refuses to let us sleep comfortably in our certainties, demanding instead that we remain awake to the mystery of being human.